On Tuesday, 7th August 1888, the new Peterhead convict prison opened its doors to the first batch of prisoners to serve their time there. It was Scotland's only prison to be used by those sentenced to hard labour. The prison building was constructed by Daniel McAndrew and Company of Loch Street in Aberdeen, the sole contractor, and took 18 months to build. It was to hold up to 208 convicts. However, provision was made for an extension to the original block when capacity reached 300, and once that number was reached, another block for a further 300 prisoners would be constructed. The cell block was 4 stories high, reaching 156 feet tall, and was 40 feet wide. An 18-feet wide corridor ran the length of the building on each of the 3 floors, with 26 cells on each side, amounting to 208 in total. Each cell was 7 feet 6 inches long, by 4 feet 6 inches wide, and 7 feet 6 inches high. 3 tiers of galleries were constructed with iron cantilevers, and Caithness paving was laid in the corridors for reaching the cells. The main iron staircase in the middle led up to the galleries. The cells were basic. There was a hammock for sleeping on, a small folding table that hung from the wall, and a small shelf in the corner for placing personal items on. Each cell also had a zinc basin with soap, a tin mug, earthenware jar, a horn spoon, a salt and pepper dish, and a stool. There was also a chamber pot, as there was no other form of sanitation for the prisoners. Each pair of cells was lit by a single gas jet, which projected on both sides, with glass an inch thick. The prison was heated by 2 large stoves set on granite blocks in the centre of the main corridor, and entered the cells through a louver at the bottom of the cell doors. Stale air was removed by an exhaust shaft and carried up the centre of the wall in each cell, discharging in foul air tanks on the top of the building. In the 1920s and 1930s, conditions in the cells improved, with a proper bed, and the prisoners now received more letters and could smoke. Further improvements were made, and by the 1970s, radios were allowed in each cell. To get the warders' attention, prisoners could use a small wooden signal that protruded from the wall at the behest of the prisoner. All the cell doors were fitted with brass inspection plates, giving the guards the opportunity to check on the prisoners. The jail had a gatehouse, where those wishing to visit the convicts would be ushered from the waiting room into an apartment, divided by iron bars into 3 separate squares. The prison warder would occupy the middle cage, so that no contraband could be passed from the visitors to the prisoners. The inner gate of the prison was made up of iron bars, 1 inch square, and weighed over a ton, while the outer gateway was made of 3 inch thick oak. Between these gates was a Pulley & Sons weighing machine. The prison also had a refractory cell block, a 2-storey building with 4 cells on each floor, and there were 2 dumb cells or silent cells, double-lined and double-doored. These were soundproof, and the bed was made of concrete, with the only other item being the chamber pot. This building had 2 small exercise yards attached to it. As a punishment, the prison housed a tripod, which was used for those who refused to step into line. The prisoner was tied to the frame and whipped with a cat-o'-nine-tails, which tore the flesh. It was one of the most brutal punishments at Peterhead, and only sanctioned by the governor. Birching was another form of punishment, but both of these were abolished in 1939. The prison also had an infirmary, which was built in the northeast corner of the yard, and also contained 4 cells, each one measuring 13 feet by 7 feet by 10 feet high. There was also a doctor's room, surgery, kitchen, and so on the ground floor, while on the upper floor was a large hall which was used as a hospital ward, along with a smaller room which was the nurse's room. There was also an offices and stores building near the gateway. The laundry, kitchen, bathhouse and so on were in a line of buildings separated from the cell block by a narrow passage. The clothes were to be dried by steam, and all the cooking was also to be done by steam. There was a 6-horsepower engine in the kitchen for pumping water through the pipes to these buildings. The heating and engineering works were carried out under the watchful eye of Mr. Young from the Prison Commissioner's Office in Edinburgh. The bachelor warders' quarters had a mess room, a kitchen, a reading room and washing facilities, as well as 12 bedrooms so they could stay on the site. Married warders had separate accommodation for themselves and their families, and the 3-storey building could hold up to 8 families. The head warder had use of a cottage. All the warders were issued with uniforms and carried sidearms and revolvers, while the civil guards were issued with rifles. Outside the prison walls was the governor's house, its first occupant being Major Simon A. Dodd, who'd come up from Barlinnie Prison in Glasgow, which had opened 6 years earlier. All the buildings at the prison were built of granite, concrete and cement, and the total cost of the project amounted to £32,000. On Tuesday, 21st August, the second batch of 20 prisoners arrived. They were to be employed, like the others, in the Harbour of Refuge works at Peterhead. They travelled up from Perth by train earlier that morning, accompanied by 4 warders. At noon, Peterhead station was thronging with crowds, waiting to see them. Chained at the waist in 4 batches of 5, they were escorted onto 2 waiting buses and driven quickly to their final destination. The reason for the construction of the prison near the old Admiralty Yard was for the construction of the South Breakwater to provide a safe refuge for shipping in the area. The prisoners were used to quarry the stone and transported to the nearby Stirling Hill quarry in wagons, where they would carry out their back-breaking work. Dynamite was placed in one wagon for blasting the stone, while in the other up to 35 prisoners were transported to their particular work site. The quarry had been in the running to site the prison itself, but had been rejected. The prisoners supported the civilian labour force employed in carrying out the building of the 2,700 feet long breakwater between 1892 and 1912, bringing the estimated costs down substantially. The one job every prisoner wanted to do was work in the laundry. It was easier work, and they would be warm and dry. They were not allowed to work in the kitchen where the food was prepared by the officers and placed in hot plates. This was then dished out by passmen, those prisoners who'd earned the privilege by being well behaved. Queues formed and the prisoners would take their food back to their cells to eat it. The plates were only returned when they came for their next meal. During the 1970s, Peterhead's prisoners organised themselves into gangs, with one gang leader, known as the Red Devil, murdering another in his cell. The victim had been stabbed 17 times and was dead when found by warder Jackie Stewart. The Red Devil was later stabbed himself, but it was thanks to the warders that his life was saved. On 28 September 1987, a siege unfolded at the prison, with 56-year-old Mr. Stewart being taken hostage, along with fellow warder Bill Florence, who was released after being stabbed 4 times, and the rioters knew he needed medical assistance. Stewart had been on patrol in D Hall when he saw his fellow officer being attacked and stepped in. He too was stabbed as he grappled with the prisoner, then thrown into the same cell as Florence. During his time as a hostage, Stewart was stripped of his uniform, beaten and made to wear prisoner's uniform. He was held until the SAS brought the riot to an end on 3rd October. By that stage, prisoners had destroyed whatever they could lay their hands on. 93-year-old Mr. Stewart died in September 2023. Peterhead Prison went on to be known as Scotland's toughest jail and housed some of the country's most notorious and dangerous men, including child killer Robert Black, murderers Peter Tobin and Donald Forbes, and Thomas McCulloch, the infamous axe murderer who spent 22 years in solitary confinement at the prison. Other prisoners of note are Oscar Slater and Johnny Ramensky. The prison closed in 2013, being replaced by HMP Grampian, and is now a museum. If you enjoyed this episode of Scotland's History, please like, comment and subscribe. Until next time, thank you for watching.